Hey everyone, this is Nick, and today we're going to address a very common misconception. We often see users angry at the removal of a single option, of a theme, of customization options, and generally the rationale behind this is Linux is about choice and customization, and the removal of an option or a theme is against the Linux philosophy. Let's see why this point of view doesn't hold up, right after I tell you about this new extension that can help protect your privacy while you're browsing online. Thanks to Startpage for sponsoring this video. You might already have heard about Startpage as a search engine that uses Google results, but anonymizing them and removing every single point of data that Google could use to track you and your searches. But now they've launched a new extension called Startpage Privacy Protection. It's an extension for Chrome and Firefox, but you can also install it on any Chromium-based browser. What it does is simple. It will set your default search engine to Startpage, but you can still change that back if you prefer another private search engine. It will send do not track signals to all websites you visit. It will block any third-party tracking script. And it will replace all social media, video and music site tracking with click to activate controls. On top of that, it will display a privacy rating for each site, based on its behavior before everything was blocked. And it will also give you a complete privacy report to let you know what you blocked all throughout your browsing session. Oh, and if you're afraid that it's going to break some websites that you visit, you can tell the extension to let some cookies or some tracker scripts pass through the extension just so the website can work. If you want to try out that new extension, just follow the link in the description below. Let's get back to our Linux desktops. They have traditionally offered a lot of choice. Choice of distribution, of desktop environment, of default applications, of theme, of interface placement, even of lower level systems. Since the beginnings of the Linux desktop, you've been able to change a few colors, change the theme on most desktops, change the placement of your taskbar or window controls, and basically turn your desktop into something you're comfortable with. Or something truly atrocious that only its creator could love. Depends on the point of view. This amount of choice is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it means that virtually anyone can end up with the exact system that they love, that works exactly how they want it to, down to the smallest detail. There will be a choice for everyone, whether you like how Windows works, how macOS works, or if you prefer to make your own complete experience from disjointed parts. Even the crazy people using a tiling window manager instead of an honest, proper desktop environment can do something that they like on Linux. On the other hand, it also means that beginners don't know where to start when trying to move to Linux. They are paralyzed by the amount of concepts they need to understand and the amount of choices they could make. The fear of making the wrong choice is basically stopping a lot of people in their tracks, instead of helping them jump aboard and get started with Linux. Finally, that huge amount of choice also means that our Linux desktops are getting increasingly complex to maintain. With each new option and each new choice that is offered, the number of tests that you need to make, the quality assessment, and basically the time you're going to spend fixing, upgrading, and updating those things has a cost, a very real cost, which leads us to developer choice. Yes, developers have choices too. They actually have more choices than users. Let's get this out of the way. Developers can do whatever they want. They are the ones creating the software we use. Whether they work on an application, on a desktop environment, on a small subsystem, or on the Linux kernel, they are the ones that make our experience with Linux possible, which also gives them a lot more power over all of this than us, regular users. Now, personally, I don't subscribe to that mentality that people that are not coding don't matter. Generally, when you make a project, its goal is to have users. Without users, the project has virtually no goal to exist, unless you developed it just for your own needs, but that's not the goal or the focus of most fast projects. But on the other hand, the developer also decides what they're going to spend their time on, which feature they want to focus on, and what they want or do not want to integrate to the project. Developers for fast projects are often unpaid volunteers, which means that the time they spend on each project is their free time. And yes, some of them are also paid shills by big corporations that pay them to work on fast projects in company time. Monstrous. In any case, the time they spend is allocated however they please. If they don't want to fix a specific bug or implement a feature they don't like, they do not have to do it. They don't owe us, the users, anything. Developers also have choices. The choice to work on a new option that has to work with every other option there is, and that will have to be maintained with each refactoring of the code, each update, each library change. They have the choice to support themes or not, to support dark mode or not, to fix a very annoying bug or not. And us, as users, also have the choice to not use what they're developing if we don't like where it's going, if we don't like what they're doing. For example, when the GNOME project decides that they no longer want to support third-party themes, it's their choice. It might be taking away a choice from the user, but it's still their choice to do so. They are under no obligation, contractual or philosophical, to maintain something just because it used to exist. Change is natural in software, and having stuff disappear, being changed, being upgraded, or being removed is entirely normal. Just because something used to exist doesn't mean that it should continue to exist forever. Now let's see why Linux isn't about choice. Linux desktops offer tons of choices, but these choices are byproducts of the free and open source nature of our programs, kernels, and apps. They are not an inherent part of the Linux experience. We have choices because everyone can contribute some code, fork a project, create their own version of an application, of a desktop environment, and with each new project or fork, the number of possible combinations increase. And we haven't yet found all the possible combinations. For example, I have yet to see a distribution shipping the Plasma desktop, but with all the GNOME apps. Think about it, the best of both worlds. We don't have all these choices because there is an ethical obligation for them to exist, or because Linux mandates that people have every choice available to them. Nowhere has it ever been written or agreed to that if a developer makes something based on Linux, they have to implement each option that everyone wants or thinks they need. You have those choices on Linux. If you want a fully customizable desktop, you've got KDE. If you want a simple curated experience, you've got Elementary OS. If you want a simple keyboard-focused and mouse-focused experience, you've got GNOME. But nothing states that KDE has to use header bars or Elementary OS has to use a minimize button. Just because these options exist on another desktop doesn't mean that they should exist on every desktop. Projects that refuse to implement certain features are not going against the Linux philosophy. They are not ignoring their users. They don't disrespect Linux or whatever else. They just make choices as developers, as UX designers, as project leaders. They make the choices they want to reach the goal they have. If these choices mean that something you used is now removed, or that something that has existed for 10 years is now obsolete or replaced by a newer component, that's their choice. And your choice as a user is to say, screw you guys, I'm going home, where home is the previous desktop that you were using. So no, Linux is not about choice. Linux offers choices because people will fork and create projects to fit their own specific needs. But these projects do not have to offer all choices. Especially since these choices have a cost. When a developer team decides to add a preference or a feature, it's not just a set it and forget it act. As everyone who has ever worked on software will tell you, each preference has a cost. Adding more preferences makes testing and QA more complicated. Each option multiplies the number of cases you have to test for. Certain option combos can result in bugs, and each time you fix something on another preference or change how something behaves, that's one more potential point of failure. Now, believe me, I worked on all kinds of software-related projects over my 10 years as a project manager and product owner, and I'm pretty sure that I can find a mathematical correlation between the time I spent at a company before I quit and the number of options the project has. The more options, the more likely I am to quit. The more preferences you add, the more complex the UI gets as well. Take the KDE system settings. You can change a lot of things, but these settings are not legible and they're not easy to navigate. Finding something in there requires a search field. It has improved a lot, but it took a long time to get to that point and it's still not super usable for most people. Then there's the Unix philosophy that people also often bring up. Linux isn't Unix, but Unix has a very simple philosophy. Each program has to do one task and do it well. The more features and options you add, the more it strays from that simple goal. There's also the time cost of features and preferences. The more you have, the more time developers will have to spend on updating them, fixing them, refactoring them, and testing them, which means less time for other features, other bug fixes, performance improvements, and more. So, to conclude, Linux does offer a ton of choices to their users. And these choices are generally here because everyone is free to take the code from something else, fork it, modify it, implement it, or add something else. But these choices are not part of some grand philosophical thing that Linux has. There is no Linux ethical guide that dictates that every project should have every choice or implement what their users demand. Developers have as much choice as users in the matter, if not more. And since adding preferences, options, and features have a very real cost for developers in terms of time, and for users in terms of software quality and stability, it makes no sense to think that Linux is about user choice, as in, I want to have my favorite option on every program or every desktop that I use. Linux is not about choice. If every project implemented every option whatsoever because Linux is about choice, then you virtually would have no choice at all because every project would be the exact same with the exact same options. So thank you everyone for watching this video. It was made possible by Slmbook, and they're getting you 150 euros off the Slmbook Executive using this offer code at checkout. It's a really cool Ultrabook with a nice 3K display, a great keyboard, a nice magnesium chassis, plenty of I/O. It's a very good choice, and at 150 euros off, it's a no-brainer. I left a link in the description below. Click it if you want to grab that laptop. So thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, turn on notification, write a comment. And if you disliked the video, you can, well, dislike it and write a comment as well. And if you think that what I'm doing is pretty cool and you want to help support this, you can join my Patreon subscribers or my YouTube members. Every single one of them gets access to a weekly Patreon cast and the right to vote on the next topics I'll cover. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!